I'd like to, oops, sorry, my Zoom is asking me if I'm okay with being recorded, which I am. There we go. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Rules, Policy, and Legislation Committee for Monday, June 7th, 2021. And Ms. Casco, can you please note the committee members present, any other commissioners present?
Thank you, I have, thank you.
Wonderful, and welcome to staff and members of the public. Really appreciate everyone being here. We are going to switch it up a little bit just to keep things interesting, and we're going to begin with the second part of our agenda, which is the board policies, and then we will come back to the legislative update. So, Mr. Davis, do you want to? Are you going to start on this, or?
Sure, I'll kick
Wonderful.
it off.
Thank you.
So as you stated, we've moved the consideration of board policies to the beginning. And to that end, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Hauk. And as you can see, there are also several other staff members present to provide some context and answer questions regarding the proposed policies.
Great, thank you, Mr. Davis. I think we'll just go in order if that's okay with the chair. One item I'd like to note, Commissioner Alexander, we are going to pull board policy 5141.31, which is immunizations. Other than that, I think we can get started with the dual enrollment in college classes, and that is board policy 6172.1. And I don't know if we have any staff here to speak on this policy. If so, if you could give me a signal. If not, I'll just go through our brief changes on this. Okay, so we've made a couple updates to this board policy. One is to change the terminology so that it matches our current practice, which is that we use the term dual enrollment instead of concurrent enrollment. And to add a paragraph that reflects our current arrangement with College and Career Access Pathway Agreement with the City College. So pretty straightforward, small changes. Are there questions about this policy? Okay. Do you want to move and second these all at once, Chair Alexander, or do you want, how would you like to proceed?
I think it would be great if you could give us the presentation on the whole thing, and then we can take public comment on any of the items that members of the public may wish to speak about before we have our discussion.
Perfect. Okay. So the next item is board policy 4112.2, and this is certification. I don't think there are any staff members to speak on this. And this board policy is a new board policy, and as the slide indicates, it really just sets forth our obligation to ensure that the certificated individuals in front of our students possess the appropriate credential. It also sets forth the criteria and hiring hierarchy, if you will, for credentialing. Are there any questions on this before I move on? Okay. The next policy is my favorite policy, which you all see like every other month, it feels like, our uniform complaint policy. So this has been updated really for some technical updates. We're updating it to reflect some changes to the citations in the California Code of Regulations. We've reformatted the list so that it more clearly, and I think in plain English, identifies the list of programs that are subject to the policy. It tracks more clearly the recommended modeling from the California School Board Association. It doesn't have substantive changes in that list. It does add nutrition services under the complaints that are not covered by this policy. That's a relatively recent change in the law. Moving to the next one, I think, is immunizations, which is the policy that we pulled. for tonight or this afternoon. Sexual harassment, this is a somewhat substantive change, and this reflects the change in the law for Title IX regulations. So the committee will remember that in the outgoing months of the Trump administration, the administration changed the Title IX regulations to incorporate several due process protections for individuals who are accused of Title IX violations, as well as narrowed the definition of conduct that can violate Title IX. So this policy reflects the changes that are now mandated by federal law. But as Chair Alexander and I were discussing last week, it importantly does not change our definition of sexual harassment and prohibited conduct. So internally, we still prohibit the same conduct, but in terms of what we investigate and address under Title IX regulations, that now tracks federal law. So the next set of policies on the next slide, these all are technical updates to reflect a change in organizational structure in the district. These complaints previously went to a team that used to be referred to as the employee relations team. That team is now, or excuse me, it used to be referred to as the talent management team, but now part of that team is employee relations. So we just want to make sure that when people have complaints, they know where to file them. So we want to make sure our policies are accurate and reflect that. So that's why these changes are coming to you. The next set, and here's where we get into a couple meatier changes. Board Policy 5030, our wellness policy. And I think for this policy, Chief Lau Smith and her team have a presentation or at least a few points they want to make for the committee tonight. Chief Lau Smith, I'll turn it over to you here.
Thank you, legal counsel. How I just really blanked on what your title is, but that's good enough.
I think you just need to say because I don't know how else to call me.
Thank you for that. Hello, commissioners, and thank you for the opportunity to present. Saida Hafiz is also with me tonight, and I may be calling her for some questions I may need more detail for, as well as Hannah Smith. And I'm not sure if anyone from Student Nutrition Services has joined yet. So we will do the best we can. So this is sort of I would kind of say a two-step process in which tonight the policy recommendations that we have are really to remove, they're a little bit more transactional than the more comprehensive wellness policy we may come back with after we complete a stakeholder process. But tonight, what we're trying to do is just align the wellness policy with some recommendations to CDE and federal policy by removing detailed historical language, some of the declarations and definitions, and reorganizing sections to better align with the language across regulations. So tonight is a little bit transactional, and then you can go to the next slide. We will begin a more thorough and community stakeholder involved wellness policy update as we move through it. So this is sort of what we're doing tonight. And then you go to the next slide. And this will talk about the process that happened in 2015. It was a really comprehensive, holistic, and inclusive process to develop the original wellness policy that we are updating tonight. And we are going to embark on a more thorough policy update over this next school year, where we'll be inviting parents, guardians, students, employees, all stakeholders to really look at the policy and align it with district priorities, incorporate anti-racist practices, be sure to include the most up-to-date research findings, be as visionary as our stakeholders imagine it to be, and then to continue to align with CDC's whole community, whole child model. And the update is hoped to be done and presented sometime during the 22-23 school year. Salute. Next slide. This is just kind of a timeline of where we've been since 2003 when we passed the first wellness policy. It was revised again in 2007 and again in 2019. Sorry, I'm going up and down. 2015 was probably when the biggest revision happened. And as you can see, we're doing a small revision now and getting ready for the next update in the next year or so. And I think that is it. And the next slide. Trying to remember. Yep. So I wanted to pause there and just to see if, did you want to do questions now, Commissioner Alexander, or did you want us to keep moving on?
Not unless there's just clarifying questions. Okay, I see. Commissioner Lam saying no. So yeah, whenever is that it for the presentation?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, wonderful. Thank you. That was perfect. Ms. Casco, can we see if there is public comment on any of the policy recommendations?
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Casco and Chair Alexander, we did have one last policy on tonight's agenda. If we could just switch back to that real fast. The nutrition program compliance. So this policy is a new policy. And this is basically to set forth the duties and responsibilities of the compliance coordinator and also to set forth a complaint process for complaints that are filed about our nutrition program. One important point here, in the 6 years that I've been here, I don't think we've ever had a complaint about our nutrition program. We're not bringing forward this, this policy because we have complaints. We're bringing it forward because we're specifically carving it out of our uniform complaint policy. And so we want to make sure that we have a policy in place should there be a complaint to come forward. And I don't think we have staff on the line tonight to address this, but if we do, and I'm neglecting to recognize you, please, by all means, speak up.
I'm expecting them, but they're not on yet, so.
Okay, because we're going so quickly in tonight. We're so efficient. Okay. Now I think we're done.
Efficiency is going to be the new name of the Rules Committee. Pardon me.
All right, I like it.
Mr. Chairman, Jennifer Labar is online. She has her hand raised and she's staff. I don't know if she wants to speak to this. Mhm.
Wonderful. Ms. Lavar, would you like to say something, add something?
Hi, everyone. I'm just letting you know. Hi there. Okay. I was having a hard time joining as a panelist, just wanting to signal that I was here in case anything was coming up. So, hello.
Thank you for being here. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Yeah. And Mr. Chairman, there are no other speakers to the items.
All right. Then let's move to commissioner discussion. Commissioner Lamb, is there anything?
Do you want to take public comment, Commissioner Alexander?
We did. Nobody wants to comment.
Nobody
Oh,
stated.
I don't have any questions as far as just overall comments, overall with the dual enrollment, that's been a really important program that has offered our students more options. I know that also there's been recent support also from the city. So that partnership, I think we've had a strong partnership, but to really continue to strengthen that dual enrollment program is important. And overall, I think we've talked quite a bit as in this committee around the different complaint procedures. So I think, however, the clearer we can make it accessible for information for our students, our families to understand what that process is and how they can, be engaged should anyone want to, lift up and file complaints, that it's easy. So and accessible. So thank you.
Wonderful. Yes, and I would just like to thank staff for all these, what are mostly technical amendments to make our policies clearer and more comprehensible. And I particularly appreciate Chief Lausmith's explanation of how the more substantive changes will be happening, input and potential changes to the wellness policy. So, so thank you for all that. And with that, I believe we can vote on recommendations. would it, General Counsel, would it be appropriate to do them all at once, or should we do separate votes?
I think they're often forwarded all at once, so I think that's fine, Chair Alexander.
All right.
Just need to note that with the exception of the immunization policy, which
Yes.
was pulled by General
Right.
Counsel.
So, Commissioner Lamb, should we do a motion to that effect, or?
Yes, so move a positive recommendation from the Policy and Rules Committee of the various board policies, except for the exclusion of the withdrawal of Board Policy 5141.31 of immunizations.
And I'll second that.
Thank you. Is that by general consent, commissioners?
Yes.
All right.
Seems
Thank-
like
Thank you.
wonderful. Thank you so much. So let's move to the legislative item. Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Chair Alexander. So we're going to move back to the beginning of the presentation, and we'll start with the current status of the 21-22 state budget. And we have a Pajela from Capital Advisors here to make a presentation on that.
Thanks, Mike. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to go fairly quickly here and then just take questions if there are questions. As you all know, the budget has yet to be finalized. We're in the last stages of that. By June 15th, the legislature needs to send the budget over to the governor, and he needs to sign it by July 1st. So I just wanted to highlight the areas where there's some differences between what the governor is proposing and what the legislature is proposing. And sorry, is that sound in other people's ears as well? Yeah. Okay. And then we'll go from there. So the main differences are that the legislature is assuming higher revenues. They're taking the legislative analyst office revenue numbers as opposed to Department of Finance. There's differences in several billions of dollars in terms of revenue estimates. What that means is that the legislature is assuming a higher Prop 98 guarantee by about $2.5 billion in the budget year 21-22. So there's some additional spending on the legislative side, although $500 million of that does go into the Prop 98 reserve. So there's a total of about $2 billion difference. With that extra money, they can do a few different things. They propose paying off all the principal apportionment deferrals. So you may remember the governor proposed to leave in one deferral from June 22 to July 22. And that was going to be about $2.6 billion. So the legislature proposes to pay that off. I should say on all of these items I'm going to discuss, we have no idea at this point who's going to prevail, the governor, the legislature, or a compromise between the two. On costs for school employers related to employee pensions, the legislature wants to spend some money from Prop 2, nearly $3 billion to pay down school employer costs for STRS and PERS. So that $2.8 billion is spread out over 4 years, roughly $400 million of relief in the budget year. So that's something that could be helpful. There's a more technical provision. Danielle will know all about it. It's related to EDD, an increase in the school employer fund rate related to unemployment insurance. So under the agency rulings, that rate was going to go up to 1.23% for school folks. Instead, if the legislature prevails, it'll only go up by 0.5 to 0.5%. So that's a pretty significant difference in your budget, depending on which of those two numbers we get. For some context, the rate was only 0.05% previously. So even 0.5% is an increase, but obviously significantly better than going up to 1.23. So those are the big money differences, really. And then after that, programmatic differences, both the governor and the legislature are strongly sort of supportive of this expansion of transitional kindergarten. The major difference, I would say, is the legislature is also focusing on increased funding and expansion of childcare, right, to go along with that. So the governor is focused very much on TK and less specific support for the child care preschool side. And the legislature is looking at a whole mixed delivery package. So they're going to have to spend a lot more money, but they want to increase child care rates and slots. So that's an issue you've probably heard a lot from locally, is concern that, hey, you're shifting these kids over to the the K-12 system, but what about us? What about the kids we're going to be serving? Okay, another couple differences, and then I'll stop, is probably related to the governor's focus on a couple programs to increase staff and to expand learning time, but the governor's focusing on only those districts that receive concentration grant funding. So those school districts that are 55% or greater unduplicated students. The legislature is okay with the plan of increasing staff in certain schools and expanding learning time, but they want to focus instead on the numbers of unduplicated kids wherever they happen to be in California, whether you hit that concentration grant amount or not. So without going into the details, I'd say the key difference is the governor was talking about increasing the concentration grant funding amount from half the base rate to 65% of the base rate. The legislature is saying, no, what we want to do instead is increase the supplemental amount, right? So that's for every kid that's an unduplicated kid, from 20% to 23.3%. That has actually interesting dynamics. I actually think that fiscally benefits the district, because unless you're a concentration grant district of 75% or more, you're probably better off with this change to the supplemental rate. So those are the key differences. I'm not delving in too much because so much is still in play. But that's kind of where things stand now. There's a lot of other programs, obviously teacher programs and lots of other stuff that I didn't hit, but I thought I would stop there and just see if there are questions on any parts of the budget that you want me to focus on.
Commissioner Lamb.
Thank you, Abe, for the presentation. So maybe you can just share with us kind of what do the final weeks look like, kind of where we think there could still be opportunities to, stress as a district, our priorities or things that we're really considering and how that impacts us locally.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think on the big picture money items, most of that has probably already been decided. One of the big changes, and I think you probably know this already, one of the big changes in the politics this time around, for many years, the Senate and the Assembly were not able to get together on their view of a budget. So we would always say, here's the Assembly's priorities, here's the Senate's priorities, and here's what the governor wants, right? And it'd be sort of a three-ring circus. This is one of the first times in a while that the Senate and the Assembly got together and tried to have a common view of the budget. So their leverage is significantly, the amount of leverage they can exert on the governor is significantly higher this year. Having said that, certainly with the recall election looming, the legislature is not looking to embarrass the governor. I'm pretty sure they're going to come to an agreement on a budget. Where are the issues that you could still have some impact? Probably there's a lot of conversation. This is not so much a budget issue, but it's tied up with the budget, or it's not a fiscal issue, but it's tied up with trailer bill language. The areas that I think that they're still struggling with is what to do with independent study / distance learning, right? And we all know this one. So I think there is general recognition that we don't want an alternative program, that we want kids in school, in person. I think everybody agrees with that. The problem is, what do you do with the traditional independent study kids when you're now trying to also serve a very small number of kids that can't go in person because of issues related to COVID? And that's just not a very comfortable mix, because what we learned from SB 98 is with those kids that can't go in person because of the COVID impact, you want to do stuff like worry about synchronous learning opportunities, daily interaction, all of those things that you need to focus on to make sure you're not leaving kids behind. Those things aren't really relevant to the kids that were served through traditional independent study, right? Because those kids were often in those programs specifically because they couldn't do daily interaction, right? They're athletes or actors or whatever, you know? So I think that's one area which the legislature and the governor are still struggling with. How did they find that line? I think they're going to land upon just leaving it in traditional independent study with a few tweaks, and that they're not going to create a distance learning program. And that's probably a good thing overall. And
can I ask a
yes,
follow-up?
sure.
Follow-up on that? Sorry. What about like distance learning as a supplement for coursework that otherwise might not be accessible at a particular school? Or I know that's been something that's been come up in rural areas, but it's also even come up here in San Francisco, where students have noted, like high school students have said, oh, maybe we could offer an AP class that's only offered at one high school, for example, to expand enrollment across the district. Are things like that going to be permissible?
So I'm not an expert in this area. I think to some extent they're permissible already in terms of being counted as instructional time. What I know is that they don't want a distance learning model as the way in which you receive your ADA funding, right? So they're not going to allow that. But to the extent that could you complete some of your coursework through distance learning, I actually think that's currently permissible. But I don't know much about the policy, but I can look that up and be prepared next time we talk about what the limitations are on that. But I do think you can actually access coursework. And so, for example, if the district could provide a certain course virtually as opposed to in person, and it otherwise wouldn't have been available for, let's say, you know, high school students at a certain school, I think they can access that already. But I'll look into that some more.
Abe, again, this isn't square in the budgeting and kind of fiscal impact, but as you know, I'm particularly focused in on both this distant learning piece or the independent studies. It sounds like, as you mentioned, the governor and the legislature are still working that out. And, you know, I'm assuming also in working with the State Board of Education. So intersecting with that is the California Department of Public Health. I know that we are all awaiting some very important decisions that would otherwise have really, you know, implications that would impact what we've already started moving ahead with, which is a full-time fall return in-person learning for our students as a district. Any indication from in Sacramento about when those final guidance will be released?
Yeah, we made a bunch of those calls today. We made a bunch of those calls today. You're exactly right. And no, I don't have a date, but they're getting a lot of pressure. And we said, look, you know, you guys have to understand, you know, answers to questions like what's the rules for adults at schools? Masks, no masks, vaccinated, not vaccinated. What are the rules for how we ask whether you're vaccinated or not vaccinated? What are our options if you choose not to be vaccinated? They haven't sorted any of that out really yet. And we have said to them, you know, you're failing to understand how much lead time we need to open sort of efficiently and effectively. And so, yeah, we're asserting a lot of pressure there, and we hope to get something. They've heard from up and down the state all over that this is a major problem. You know, and remember, it wasn't that long ago when we didn't know how far apart desks needed to be. I mean, you just can't configure a classroom if you don't know how far apart the desks need to be. So yeah, I wish I had a more satisfying answer. All I can tell you is everybody's putting pressure on them to get that done.
Thank you. Because I, you know, you've heard me voice that, and I'm glad that, you know, our colleagues up and throughout the state are voicing that, because I think it's also very important for the public to understand that those decisions that are led by the California Department of Public Health, which then our local Department of Public Health is ready. They're like ready to, you know, as soon as the state makes its decisions to move forward with their adoption locally. So I don't want to beat the same, you know, drum, but how important that is. The sooner those decisions are made, and if the state of California is going to open up its economy June 15th, we're just 8 days away from that, and we really need that relief and decisions at the local level to be able to do what we for that in-person learning for students.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I'm glad that that June 15th date has become almost politically impossible for the governor and the state to get away from that. And it's also, I think, going to be extremely difficult for them to not to have clearly thought through rules or fairly clearly thought through rules for the various segments of the economy, including schools, right? So I am hoping that that's the outside date from which we'll get some clarity. So yeah, we're all pushing hard for that one.
Thank you.
And those are the two major areas that I think, could still be influenced by school folks is the whole thing about distance learning, independent study, and when are we going to get clarity on the sort of reopening rules. I think
Could this
that's
be a
it.
good time to pause for public comment?
Check. There is one speaker at this time.
Wonderful. Let's go ahead and do that for 2 minutes.
Michelle?
Thank you, Esther. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Michelle Jacques-Menegas with the Parent Advisory Council, and I was really, I really appreciated Mr. Hajela's comments around that difference between independent study and sort of the goals of engaging a student in distance learning. And while I recognize it's not necessarily what your job is to do today, I did just want to continue to elevate the fact that both because of potential COVID-related causes and other ongoing issues, so a lot of our kiddos have a lot of mental health issues that make it really, really challenging for them to engage in a traditional in-person education model on a consistent basis, that this be something that we kind of keep in our minds and keep working on as a goal to figure out how to do this. I also really, really love the idea of creating greater access to a broader range of courses via distance learning models so that students are not missing out on something just because they don't attend the school where it's offered. I think it's a great opportunity to do catching up on needed credits and coursework and just a lot of things. I think we have a lot of potential there. Thank you so much.
There are no others. Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. We have 6 speakers now. Okay. Okay, we start with Gregory. No? Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I saw the microphone and I thought that was them. Never mind. Thank you. There are no more speakers, Commissioner.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Casco. Wonderful. So, Mr. Hajela, is there a second part or another part to your presentation, or is that?
No, I think that's all we were going to do this round.
Wonderful.
Yep.
Commissioner Alexander, I did have some additional questions, but I just wanted to give you the floor in case you had additional topics you wanted.
Sorry, no, go for it. It's perfect.
So I'm curious around the teacher programs and residencies, because I think the fact is that, as a state, I'm curious around what the workforce projections will be looking like, not only for the fall, but for multi-year as we do planning around our staffing. And that what the governor does, invest some funding for, residency programs or looking at how we can recruit, retain talent. Anything that you want to add to the discussion here for our consideration locally?
Yeah, I think that's the one area where the legislature actually cut back slightly on what the governor had proposed. I wouldn't say significantly, but so the Educator Effectiveness Block Grant, which I think is fairly useful money because it comes to the district and you can determine your own professional development needs rather than have it sort of dictated by the state. That is still going to be at $1 billion for next year, so fairly healthy. You can usually assume San Francisco will get about 1% of that. the governor had proposed 1.5 billion, but that went down a little bit. But there are some other programs, the teacher residency program, there's going to be $250 million for that if the legislature gets their way. But I think they're looking at that as ongoing for more than 1 year, whereas the governor's looking at one time, $500 million. So there's a few small differences, but I would say it's welcome news that there is a lot of money in a lot of different pots to try to look at the pipeline issue and training issue. And, you know, to be determined whether that's going to be enough to get us where we need to be, because we know we have these huge challenges in recruiting folks right now. And all of that's been exacerbated by the pandemic and what's going on with the workforce. So I don't have anything specific other than to say, you know, it's been a long time since we had this sort of investment in professional development and retention. So that part of it is good. I also think, as a reminder, there's a lot of additional funding for school districts that's flexible money. And so, you know, think about the fact that there's more money coming in just at the base level that you can sort of try to address some of these issues, because I don't think there'll ever be enough in sort of the side programs related to workforce. But having a 5% COLA and a few other bumps to ongoing funding hopefully will help a bit.
Yeah, and just a flag that, again, it's not necessarily, you know, centered around the fiscal impact or the budget process right now, but I know that in previous discussions with this committee was really that, you know, how do we look at, you know, leadership development, skills development pipelines, like our paraeducators for us locally is a very important you know, path for our staff to become certified, and really looking at what are the opportunities there. Are, you know, are there barriers within the state? Could we help, you know, being another voice around how we can help that quote scaling and the, again, the recruitment, retainment, and then ultimately with the skill set levels that we need for our educators to be working with our staff. So Commissioner Alexander, maybe just something to flag, you know, for this committee to be able to discuss, you know, once the budget is passed at the state level, but that I just know that this is going to be an issue that will, you know, be with us for years to come. One other ask around the transitional kindergarten, I'm very particularly interested in around the, you know, as there's more discussions, you know, both coming from the governor's team, governor's administration and the legislature, you know, where are you seeing around your comment around, you know, what is the state's plan looking at childcare? I think I'm particularly interested in honing on two things. Is one, you know, what's your sense on at the policy level, how to support school districts as they, if this is to move forward at this scale, to support school districts. I know there have been some initial planning grants that have been available, but the time frame that the state is looking for this, you know, broadening, expanding transitional kindergarten, and then on the 0 through 5, or I'm sorry, the early education, you know, where are those opportunities around looking at school readiness and quality programs, not only looking at childcare slots, which is important, of course, but really that continuum of early education into transitional kindergarten and then into the K-12 system institution.
So on the TK sort of issue first, I think the legislature believes there needs to be a little bit more lead time. So they're planning on slowing implementation by a year. They are putting just as much money in and want to get there in 4 years, but they want to slow down a little bit and make sure folks are prepared. I think they have greater concerns for both workforce preparation, right, to make sure the teachers are ready for these kids, that, and then facilities are going to be an issue because we're talking about smaller class size for these younger kids, right? So you might have 10 kids to a teacher and you're going to need the room configurations for that, which not everyone's going to have. So those are at least two of the issues that the legislature thinks will require a little bit more, as you said, planning time to be prepared for. And I think there's still a lot of discussion about what what training ought to be provided to these teachers. So I think there's a consensus that there will need to be training, but what that focuses on and what the new challenges are for kids at these age. And then what does it change by cohorts, right? Because we're going down in sort of these 3-month increments. So we're getting younger and younger kids each year out. And so I'm not an expert here, but are there developmental issues that are significant between 4.5-year-olds and 4-year-olds? And so are we gonna have to prepare for that? I know that's a big issue going forward. And then on childcare, big issue for, Assemblymember McCarty and others in the Assembly. They're looking at exactly the issues you're focusing on, which is not just the slots and the rates, which the assumption is increasing the rates allows you to do a little bit around quality, hopefully, and the type of folks you can attract, but also sort of making it a system that meshes a lot better than the current one does. But I would be lying if I said that a lot of thinking has been done on that already. Everybody sees what's in front of them, and I think this is the reason why you're seeing this part of the budget having a lot of money in it, but also having a long implementation timeline, because I think we're going to need a whole lot of work on the prep for all of this. So I'm glancing at the programs right now, and very few, if any of them, are expecting implementation in the budget year, right? So they're all a couple of years out, with exactly the point you made earlier, the idea that there would be at least a year planning period to get there. So I think what might be useful is for me to find out what the forums are going to be for those. So the planning usually goes, the state sets up some sort of model or template, and then that comes down to the local level. What I'll try to do is figure out what the opportunities are for participation at that state level planning, because maybe folks, if not with the school district, within the city for sure, might want to participate in that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Abe. Last area I wanted to ask was around broadband access. I know that, there was quite a bit of traction in the state legislature around kind of, broadband access, knowing with distance learning and even now, so us returning to in person, we as a district have made the decision that, we acknowledge and recognize that the quote homework app or home access is still very important. So could you give a quick update around where broadband access is, particularly for K-12, and opportunities that we can consider here locally in working with our city and local municipalities around increasing those access in a sustainable approach?
I think the main difference between now and probably the last time we spoke is that I think the funding picture is clear. The policy picture and sort of the solutions, I don't know that there's been much advancement on that, but the one big difference is there's general agreement that we've got somewhere between $7 to $10 billion to tackle the problem, right? So I think the last time we spoke, Commissioner Lamb, we were saying, yeah, but that's a big dollar item. Are they going to be able to get this? I think they feel like they have the money in between the federal money that's coming directly for this purpose, and then the additional money that's available to the state because of the surplus. It looks like, somewhere between $7 and $10 billion to address this issue. So that part of the picture has become clearer. Specifically, what they are going to do has not become any clearer as far as I could see. And maybe this is an issue of they've got to deal with the budget, and that from a policy perspective, that is too much to sort of bite off at this point and try to figure out. So I have not seen any advancements on what the actual proposal will be. I only know that they feel like they have the money for it now. What I hear consistently is, in addition to addressing access, a concern about addressing affordability. So in San Francisco, for example, you could have families that have access theoretically, but can't afford the bill. And so I do think they're making progress on that front.
Yeah, and I just wanted to lift up there, exactly to that point that, we as a district have also put that policy forward that we acknowledge how unaffordable it can be for our families. And so we've taken it upon ourselves to either through support with philanthropy, leveraging our partnership with the city so that we can really keep that at low to no cost, at least even with this past year with distance learning. And I think, however, as the state is moving forward with this policy, and I know this is getting really wonky and into the regulatory discussions, but ultimately, really examining how service providers are, going to come to the table essentially, and how to work with local municipalities, either to leverage, infrastructure that districts have or within the city so that it can be sustainable for, of course, our families, our students, but ultimately, for the educational institutions. I mean, I think we're right now paying millions of dollars through our contracts, which again is absolutely imperative that service and that we do provide it. At the same time, how do we look at leveraging local infrastructure to delivering on that promise to our families?
So that might be an area as well where let me dig around a little bit and see what the forums are going to be at the state level, because I feel like there are going to be a lot of task force and groups getting together to try to think some of these issues through, and I'll find out what those are, and hopefully folks from the city can participate.
And I just want to recognize and know that Melissa Dodd, our Chief of Technology Officer, serves on national boards and it's been very much engaged in that national advocacy. So we'd love to be able to kind of lend that expertise, the discussions that have been happening within the Biden administration, to also then, how does that align up well within the state of California? And then as being, I feel like, in San Francisco, being able to have demonstrated our ability to prioritize technology access and affordability, that we could be at one of those experts, frankly, of districts who have been able to do it and be really intentional, not only creative but strategic with those rollouts. Thank you for letting me put forward all the topics I wanted to discuss.
That's great, Commissioner Lamb, and I know I've been quietly listening, but I want to say I strongly support all those, in particular the technology access piece you just mentioned. I think is critically important, and it would be fantastic if we could be a leader on it. So, Mr. Davis.
Okay. So also, Abe, I know we had discussed this last week, and we were focused on the budget, but most of everything that's been introduced outside of that for this year is really not going anywhere. For example, the charter school oversight bill. But is there anything left out there that we might need to track going forward or have any input on?
That's a good question. Most of the controversial stuff has either sort of gone away or been modified enough so that the concerns, like AB 104, there were a lot of concerns around that initially, but those have all sort of dissipated. I think folks are assuming all the big stuff's going to happen in the trailer bill. Ethnic studies stuff has pretty much sorted itself out. Yeah, I honestly, Mike, I can't think of one right now. I can't think of a hot legislative issue for K-12 that's not a budget issue. I think they're all tied up in the budget right now.
When you said ethnic studies has sorted itself out, can you just real quick explain what happened?
Only on the legislative front. So I don't think that there's a feeling that there needs to be an additional bill beyond what the bills that are out there. And I think there is an assumption that at the state board level, the controversies are starting to smooth out and that they're going to be able to resolve the rest of them. So the legislature was concerned about passing bills that would make ethnic studies a requirement and create a model curriculum if they weren't satisfied that the state board was going to come up with a model curriculum they're okay with. I think they now think that model curriculum is going to be okay.
I see. So then the bill would be able to proceed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else on that, Commissioner Lamb? No? Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Abe. If there's nothing else on that, let's talk about free meals.
Thank you, Commissioner. So after Jennifer and Orla and Myung learned that we were having rules again this month, they asked me to place an item on the agenda so you could consider ways that we can offer some support for the Universal Meals for All Act, which I believe was reintroduced or introduced on the US Senate side a couple of weeks ago. And so Jennifer has some information about that and ways that maybe we could seek to let our federal delegation know that the board wants to offer support for that. I think that's right, Jennifer, and you can let me know if that's not right. And if we could put slide number 4 up, that would be great.
Yeah. So this is new legislation that was put up, and it was actually introduced on both the House and the Senate side. And it is federal legislation that seeks to permanently provide both or all of our meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snack for free to all students. Really, it's a continuation of the waivers that we have been allowed to operate under since the pandemic. And we are actually continuing those waivers for the next school year. So if we are able to get this happening at the federal level, we would actually, be able to make this a concrete action moving forward. And by doing this, it allows us to eliminate school meal debt, which is one of the contributing factors to our unrestricted general fund contribution. And then by doing this, it also has some incentivization of local food procurement, which we already do through our good food purchasing policy that we adopted in 2016, but it makes it at a national level. And so this is something that we would like to seek guidance from the Rules Committee about how we can support it. And so we're bringing it to you all today to have that discussion.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Ms. Casco, let's see if there's public comment on this item first before we discuss it. Thank you. Well, I will, for one, say that I'm an enthusiastic supporter of this bill, and also just would like to recognize the local history of this with the Black Panthers in 1969 in Oakland starting their own free breakfast program, which pushed the federal government, maybe not even for the best of reasons, but it worked, to then start providing to expanding what was already existing, but dramatically expanding food programs for young people. And so this is part of that legacy. I think it'd be great if we could support it. I don't know, did you want to, and I don't, Commissioner, I'd love to hear your ideas too, but were you, Ms. LeVar, were you asking for specific ideas on how? Was that the question, or was it more of just a declaration of support?
Well, I defer to Mike.
Well, so yeah. What I was thinking is that, well, a few things have happened, and please let me know if this is correct, Jennifer. I think that there have been resolutions of support drafted maybe at by the Board of Supervisors. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And there are also a number of advocacy organizations that you belong to that have expressed support. So there's formats out there for letters of support, and the inputs or the place where we could provide that support, I think, would be through our federal legislative delegation, and of course to the administration as well. And so if this committee is in support of that, we could have some letters of support tailored to those audiences drafted up for the board president.
Commissioner Alexander. I absolutely support this as well. And I think similar to our broadband discussion. I think also really important to celebrate and acknowledge the work that we've been doing locally, and just want to thank Jennifer Labar, her team, our workers who since day one have, of the pandemic and when we shut our schools down, how this was a priority of the district, and that the millions and millions of meals that have been served since over 14 plus months ago. I want to be able to acknowledge that. And again, like, this is how you do it on the local level. And this is why we've seen a direct impact and how it has made a difference in our students and families' lives. So not only a support, but this is how we've done it. I would really want to just again acknowledge and recognize the tremendous work that the team has led. So absolutely positive support, and being able to also support Senator Alex Padilla as well as being, one of the key supporters for the policy, the legislation.
Yeah, it would be interesting. That made me think, Commissioner Lamb, that one of the things we could offer to our federal delegation is maybe some testimonies, right, of maybe if we had SFUSD families that use the food service program that we provided during COVID, along with some SNS employees who were on the front lines during COVID, to be able to say, look, we did this locally. We put the money, we kind of did what we needed to do. We weren't worried about the cost, but we do need the funding to continue to be able to provide this level of service, which is what families really need. So it'd be cool to sort of highlight our what we did during the pandemic, but also support that legislation.
So with your, at your direction, I think Jennifer and I can put together that kind of information, mostly Jennifer, to show, as you said, the things that we did successfully in response to the situation, and also lend our support to the Universal Meals Act going forward. So that would be the direction we could take, if that's your choice.
Do I need is that just a general direction here, or do you need a motion?
I think it would be by general consent, right, Ms. Costco?
Yes, I don't think there's a motion needed unless legal counsel, who is also on the meeting, says there should be, but I think that just should be a direction from the chair, from the committee.
No, I think general consent is
Yes.
fine.
Good, thank
Okay.
you.
So it seems like there's general consent, and so we would love it if you could proceed as directed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and I think our last item, it's our last item for today, is the Prop I rent relief issue.
Next slide. Next slide, please.
There isn't one?
Next one. There we go. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, so, at your request, Commissioner Alexander, we placed this information regarding Proposition I on the agenda, and had discussion with Myung Lee and with Viva Mogi, and Viva is here to just give you a briefing on where we are with Proposition I, and you can take it from there.
Thank you, Mike. Hi, commissioners. My name is Viva Mogi. I'm here to just present some background and information on Proposition I, so that both of you can have similar background and information to help make any decision that you want to make today, if you do want to. Proposition I was on the ballot of November 2020, and it was passed with a 57% vote by the San Francisco voters. This was a transfer tax increase. And so what it did is it would essentially just increase about $196 million per year based on the controller's report. These funds, but by the voters, were actually whatever the funds that were collected would be going to the city's general fund. As you know, the mayor has proposed her budget on June 1st. And during that time, I have reviewed her budget. And at this time, right now, it's not specifically line item where it will be going towards. It is in her broad general, budget proposal. And I haven't been able to get exactly where it will be going towards, but I know that in the mayor's budget proposal, a lot of it will be going towards housing and also homelessness is one of our major commitments for this budget cycle. Moving forward, this decision on where the funds of the Prop I funds will go towards will be discussed during the month of June at the Board of Supervisor Budget and Appropriations Committee. If there will be any changes to the mayor's budget. This will be finalized on June 30th and then will be voted by the full board in July. And so at this time, this is as much information that we were able to gather about Prop I, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Yeah, before we do public comment, can you just clarify the situation with the supervisor's intention in using the funds for rent relief as it was publicized during the election, and the fact that the budget doesn't include money for specific additional money, local money for rent relief, which I think that's the kind of the situation I wanted to discuss.
Sure. My understanding is that, yes, Supervisor Preston, who was the main author of this proposition, when during the campaign, I heard that there was some intent and goal to push for rent relief in regards to families and residents of San Francisco that are experiencing evictions due to a lot of job loss and due to COVID-19. Right now, at this time, there is no current rent relief programs in regards to families that are experiencing evictions, as the eviction moratorium is still in place. So this would ideally become a new program. And in the current mayor's budget, there is not a new program that will be establishing that. That is something that will be discussed. I think that was something that was proposed. My understanding is that it was proposed and requested to be included in the mayor's budget. It has not. That is why during the Board of Supervisors Budget and Appropriations Committee, this is where they can make any of these shifts happen, and the Board of Supervisors can make that decision if they have enough votes to do so. At this time, I don't know of any other supervisors that have been taking a position on this outside of what I've been reading in the paper. So this is not, I haven't seen any kind of resolution or ordinance that are asking for, or actually wouldn't be an ordinance, but it would just be likely introduced during budget and appropriation.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for that summary. And so basically, yeah, I had asked for this to be agendized just for context, because the city, the mayor and the city's mayor's office of housing in the city is providing rent relief through the state and maybe federal funds, but it's coming through the state. So there is a rent relief program that started, but some of it's administered by the state, some of it's administered locally through the city. But there are a fair number of restrictions to that program, and it also isn't enough money to cover the amount of rent debt that exists in San Francisco. So part of the idea behind Prop I, to my understanding, was to use the revenue to number one, add to rent relief so that there'd be adequate funds, and secondly, to have a program that was a little more flexible. For example, one of the things that's not covered in the state program is people that don't have a formal contract or are subtenants. And as we know, a lot of low-income families, including many SFUSD families, may live in situations where they don't have a formal rent contract, and so then wouldn't be eligible for the rent relief funds that do exist. But under a program like a new program under Prop I, they could be eligible. So that was why I wanted to bring it up for discussion, just in terms of context of making sure that SFUSD families have access to the rent relief they need to be able to stay in their homes.
I just wanted to add one thing is that while there always are different campaigns that are happening, the voters do vote what's based on what's on the ballot. And I just wanted to be clear that what is placed on the ballot is that the tax that will be collected would be going to the city's general fund. And so it was never voted as a set aside. I think that's where it gets a little tricky. When there is a set aside on a ballot measure, it usually will increase the threshold for voters. And so I know that these tend to be kind of a decision that is being made. And so at my understanding of these funds is that it is collected and put into the city's general fund.
Absolutely, yeah, no, technically and legally, they can be used for anything because it was a general tax. So the question though was, voters were kind of told that this was the intention during the campaign, and I think there's a clear need. So I guess my question was if we wanted to take a position encouraging the supervisors to include this money in to use some of this money or all this money for rent relief to ensure that our families can stay in their homes. So why don't we open up, we can have a conversation in a minute though. Why don't we open up for public comment and then we can have discussion.
Okay. There's one hand that's raised, Commissioner.
Excellent, let's do 2 minutes.
Ms. Menegas? Michelle?
Hi, can you hear me, Esther?
Yes, we
Okay,
can hear
thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
This is Michelle again with the Parent Advisory Council, and I just want to quickly thank everyone for helping to make this happen. It's as you all know, it's so incredibly helpful for so many of our families, and it's unfortunate in our society that the school district has to think about these kinds of supports, but we're grateful that you do to just help relieve any stress you can on any of our families. Thank you.
Is that it? Are there any
I
other?
think that's it, Commissioner. That's it.
Thanks. All right, Commissioner Lamb, let me open up to your thoughts.
Yeah, I'm curious if, how do we partner right now with the city or through the Mayor's Office of Housing or Community Development to understand what are the rent relief needs of our families? Do we know if we have that data or an intention to understand that scope?
We currently have not ever, the only MOU that we have signed with the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development was a couple of years ago. And it was in regards to more for our teachers and our educators, and not just our teachers, but all employees, I'm sorry, to be able to receive some housing counseling. And before there was before the ballot measure passed to receive eviction protection, we were able to provide that as well through a small portion of our QTA funds to be able to do that. We have not discussed how our families can actually receive part of these the funds that are coming from the state and federal government through MoCD or any other department, but that is something that, you know, that is an option of something that we could look into as well.
Thank you. And it sounds like, I mean, we are the Board of Supervisors, they're early in their budgeting process. Is that correct? What's the schedule of the budget committees? And if Viva can speak to what that kind of time frame looks like in the coming month or so.
Yeah, I have not actually took a deep dive into the budget. I was obviously going to start this week, and usually it does pretty go on almost daily until June 30th. And so it will be like heavy negotiations from now until June 30th in regards to every line item that will be coming on. So.
Commissioner Alexander, go ahead.
Sorry, usually every department will be doing its presentation, and then the board will have its discussion, and I'm certain that's going to be starting very soon, if not already.
Commissioner Alexander, I'm happy to pause and then we can have kind of more dialogue if that's preferred as well.
I'm trying to think if I have other thoughts. No, I don't have a lot of other thoughts at the moment. If you had other things you wanted to.
I think overall for me, I would want to, we are early in the process as now that the budget has been presented, but the Board of Supervisors will really, hold those hearings, hold more of a community public process. And so I think for me, just being able to, see and monitor what those developments look like in those conversations. So just certainly am very intrigued and supportive in making sure our families, are getting the supports they need as we move forward with COVID recovery. And I want to be able to make sure that, as those discussions and developments are happening at a Board of Supervisors, that we're, working with them as well.
So I don't know what the process would be or what this could look like, but I guess my proposal was that we, I'm just worried, especially as we think about, we've talked a lot about families leaving the district, and I think if, we serve so many low-income families, and we know that there's hundreds of millions of dollars of rent debt out there in the city. So I just think, in my opinion, it's one of the most urgent things facing our students and families. And so I wonder if there's a way that we could urge the supervisors to address it in the budget. So in a way, it doesn't, as Viva pointed out, technically there's no such thing as Prop I funds because they actually go into the general fund. So, but again, that had been brought up as a potential amount of funds to be used. I think that was the issue. And I guess what I would be asking is could we urge the supervisors to find local funds to supplement what's already available from the state for rent relief in order to keep our families here. And again, I don't know what that would look like in terms of our advocacy, but.
Yeah, and I think again, as I mentioned earlier, that I would want to see if we can get more information and data about our families, and their experience. And then if my preference would be at this time, if we can have staff closely monitor and be able to really report out proactively to the board. So should we make sure that we don't miss, potential opportunities as these discussions are deepening at the board level and as they go through their process.
So you mean you'd rather not take a formal position right now? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. But I think we could come back in a couple of weeks to be able to kind of see where we're progressing and having staff be proactive in reporting back out to the board. So we understand what the budget environment's looking like.
I guess I don't understand. I don't know when we would take a position since rules doesn't meet until we wouldn't meet again until after the budget. So that's why I brought it up today, but I'm not sure what that would look like.
If I may make a suggestion, there are different, as of right now, there isn't a rent relief program. If there is, and you would like it to be focused, some of the funds, if the Board of Supervisors were able to create a fund, and you would like that to be focused towards some of our families, that has happened in the past, whether it's our down payment assistance loan program. Teacher Next Door did expand to other public employees, but that was funds dedicated to our teachers and educators to support with down payment assistance. And there are other programs, like I said, housing counseling and other programs through the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development, where they did set aside specifically to mostly to our teachers. Those are kind of the things that have happened in the past to make sure that some of the funds will go to our families or our teachers. Those are the type of advocacy that we could also do if there is a rent relief program. And so that can be done once it is the funds have been appropriated to a specific program. And again, like it is a little, I will say that it is fairly early in the process that we're just not sure, like, even if we push for it, the questions that we would get asked is like, how many students do you think are impacted? and what is the type of needs are there within our schools and families. And those are questions that I haven't been able to gather quite yet.
So I guess that kind of concerns me. If we don't have any idea of what the impact on our families is going to be, if I mean in terms of evictions.
I wouldn't know how we would collect that currently in the data, because we don't ask our families questions about evictions. We could reach out to our CBO partners, or I would lean on other staff here today of how we do collect that type of data. I don't have an answer to that.
No, I know, and that's not your role. I guess I'm trying to understand why we wouldn't. It seems like there's some reluctance around telling the supervisors that we want to make sure that there's more money for rent relief. Is that fair? I guess I didn't think it was going to be that controversial of a suggestion, but I'm sensing that from staff and maybe from Commissioner Lamb too, there may be some hesitancy, but I'm not sure I understand what it's about. So maybe I'm missing something, because to me it seems kind of obvious that we would want our families to have the rent debt relief they need to be able to stay in the city.
Yeah, Commissioner Alexander, I just don't as I'm getting briefed on the budgeting process, on the Prop I dollars, and what the federal and both state rent relief programs look like, and in the absence of anything locally, I think for me it's just being able to understand more about that scope and the investments of what we're thinking it would take. So that's just my initial reaction and just thoughts and feedback.
And I just want, from the staff perspective, for me, hearing about this on Thursday and then trying to, have some sort of intelligent presentation for you today, I think, we've provided all the information that we know about the proposition, and Viva has provided all the information that we have about the city county budget process and where it stands right now. The thought that I had when Commissioner Lamb was asking about, different metrics that may be shared between the city and county and the district, we have lots of points of contact, and there probably is a lot more information out there, but Viva and I don't have that at our fingertips right now, and we'd be happy to get that information to help you make decisions. But I guess that's if there's any reluctance on our part, it's just that we are like, hey, this is what we know, and we don't want to tell you what we don't know. So.
Okay. So when could you get some information on, by when could you get information on the potential impact of rent debt and evictions on SFUSD families, so we could determine what our position should be in a way that would be timely in terms of the budget process for the city?
Yeah, I would have to lean on both the mayor's office team and also and reach out to our city agencies to better understand. Most of our children that would be impacted by this would be in SFUSD, but likely it will come out more of a report with families in San Francisco. So I think it may take like about a week or so. I won't say 2, because I think the budget process is really underway, but I can try to get us something for you as soon as possible to help kind of make a different decision.
Would you all have the capacity to do something? I would have to check with President Lopez, but at the committee of the whole on the 15th.
I haven't reached out to anyone yet, so I don't want to make any commitments, but I hear the urgency. So I will, take the next steps to make sure, and everyone is hyper focused on the budget. So I'm certain that I will get a response. I just can't commit to it at this time, since I haven't reached out to anyone in the city.
Commissioner Alexander, I'd also be intrigued to understand kind of the program design of it too. Is it completely fulfilling all debt, rent debt, again, that's just something I would want to also be more versed on as well.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I don't think the potential local program, I don't think that it has been designed in a significant fashion yet. I think that's one of the challenges. I think the urgent piece is around the budgeting for it. It sounds like have they extended, or they're going to extend the eviction moratorium until September 30th. So I think there's a little bit of a window of opportunity to take the time. And I know MoCD is really good about these things. I mean, they know how to do these programs. They're already running the state program. So I think the real immediate question is around the money. And again, I hope I'm not, I apologize if I'm bringing up things on a short timeline. I actually am surprised that as a district, we don't look into this stuff. Because as I said, I mean, this is a huge impact on our families. Like, we can't educate our students if they're homeless, right? Very effectively. I mean, we educate a lot of unhoused students, but it's if they are pushed out of the city, we can't educate them. It also dramatically impacts their education. So I guess I would encourage staff to be, I mean, to me, especially if we're thinking about government affairs, like, this is something that's happening right now. It's a critical issue impacting our city. And so I guess I didn't think it was an unreasonable thing to bring up, and I apologize if it was. But I guess I'll plan to ask President Lopez to put something on the agenda for the committee of the whole on the 15th. And hopefully we can get some information by then. I'm happy, if it's helpful to follow up offline about specific questions, I'm happy to do that for anyone who would like to talk to me. Any other discussion on this item? All right,
Mr. Alexander, I do think it'd be, just having discussion with a broader, community as a whole, or at the board meeting, would be fitting.
Yeah, no, I think that would work. I guess again, I mean, I feel like we spend a lot of time and energy talking about how we serve our low-income families, and this is like a huge impact on them. And so I hope that we can be, as a district, at least proactive in it. And if it's not the right approach, then that's fine. But to at least know that the conversation is happening in our city, that supervisors are talking about it, and so it feels like we ought to be informed about it and be able to have a position, whatever that might be. So thanks to everyone. I guess, is there anything else before we adjourn? Mr. Davis? No. Okay, thank you so much to staff, everybody, for having a pretty efficient meeting. I think we were fairly good about that, right? Really appreciate everybody's, and this meeting is officially adjourned.
Thank you
Good
so
night,
much.
everyone.
Good night. Good night. Are you turning it off, or you want me to do it? You should.